Give me 1 second, Brian. I'm still trying to connect to YouTube.
Okay.
And hopefully it doesn't do what it did to me yesterday and it cooperates. There we go.
All right, so let's get into it. Let's go ahead and do the roll call.
Okay, give me 1 second, Brian. I'm still trying to connect to YouTube.
You're playing it.
Hopefully it doesn't do what it did to me yesterday and cooperate. Want to also remind everyone to, if you're not speaking, to
Okay, so let's get into it.
your mics. Okay, give me 1 second, Brian. I'm still trying to connect to YouTube. Oh, we got, hold on. Yeah. Got some. I want to also remind everyone to, if you're not speaking, to
So let's get into it.
your mics.
Hey, Leanne, this is Dan for the YouTube. If you go on the YouTube site and actually mute the sound for that YouTube stream, you should get rid of that echo.
Justin.
Yeah, this is Dan.
Sorry, guys, there's a little bit of a delay in it connecting to YouTube, but I wasn't able to meet YouTube. Sorry about that. There you go. Okay, it sounds better now? It sounds better to everyone else on your end?
Yes.
Okay, good. So let's go ahead and take roll really quick. You can just say here or present when I call your name. I appreciate it. Mike Michelle, Kurt Dietrich, Ed Hawkins, Maura Howenstein, and I apologize if I do not pronounce your name correctly. Mitchell Fink,
Present.
Larry Chesney, Jim Rundle,
Here.
Don Erickson,
Here.
David Blocko,
Here.
Ted Erkin, John Kripotic,
Here.
Craig Knudsen,
Here.
Randy Walter,
Here.
Amy Cummings,
Here.
Brian Stewart,
Here.
and it looks like we also have Carl Stabley, Claudia Hansen, Wayne Peterson, Cammie Yu, Elena Williams, Stephanie Haddock, Amber Bosman, Bill Thomas, Schwinn Wayne, and myself, Leanna Olivas. Did I miss anyone? Okay.
So it sounds like we have a quorum, so we can move forward with item 1 of the agenda, which is approval of the agenda. I have a motion on the approval of the agenda.
Move to approve. This is John Erickson.
Second. Craig Knudsen.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, and that's approved unanimously. Item 2, public comment. Do we have any public comment in general for the meeting?
We have not received any public comment.
Thank you very much. Item 3, we're going to jump right into the Regional Transportation Plan update for the 2050. I believe, Dan, you're going to take this on.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Let me just share my screen here for a presentation. Hopefully everyone can see that. And, again, my name is Dan Denges. I'm the planning manager at RTC for the record. Some of you may have seen this, so I apologize if you're seeing it for the second or even third time, but just wanted to give this committee a kind of an overview of where we're at in our process of development of the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. we're currently under a call for projects, although we're trying to get any projects suggestions in pretty much by the end of this month. So, you know, maybe another week or so. We actually had a public survey that was open for about a month that closed earlier this week on Monday. I believe we got about 170 or so responses. So we're pretty pleased with the response rate and some good project suggestions. We're still kind of wading through all of those and trying to consolidate them and, you know, clean up any duplicates, that sort of thing. But we should have a pretty good list of some new suggestions to review. As part of this public outreach process, you know, things being what they are, we couldn't really go our traditional public meeting route, but we were able to kind of host a public meeting on our website via a video. And I'm not sure the number of responses or views we've gotten, but I do know that it's been pretty well received. We've had a lot of views, and so it seems to be a legitimate method of getting the word out and getting some feedback. So we're pleased with that as well. And of course, all RTC staff is open and available anytime anyone wants to contact us and discuss their ideas. We definitely welcome that. So just a little background. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Regional Transportation Plan. It's kind of how we, you know, develop that 10-year CIP, which kind of influences the RRIF program. But just a little background on where we get that project information from. Obviously, we're living under the current 2040 RTP right now. And while many of those projects in the more near term have been either completed or in development, some of those projects in the outer years are still being considered for inclusion into the 2050 RTP. So we'll take a look at those and evaluate them and roll them over. And we're actually going through an exercise right now to update the cost estimates on some of those to try to get a little more accuracy. Some of those have been on the books for a while, so we're again reviewing those. And in the interim from our last RTP, which was adopted in May 2017, we've also conducted a few studies and have a few more that are pending. Those are kind of listed below here, but we did a study specifically for the South Meadows area and also the university area, kind of that gateway district between the university and downtown Reno. We completed an 88 transition plan, which really focused on RTC owned facilities. Not only our buildings here, but more importantly, probably is our bus stops and seeing how accessible those are. We're under development of a coordinated human services transportation plan. And that really is just kind of looking at efficiencies and how we can best support the accessibility to those that are more transit dependent and maybe partner with some of our nonprofit providers. And we're also have an RFP, or we're in procurement with our advanced mobility study, which we're really looking at kind of the future of mobility in the Truckee Meadows here, looking at alternative fuels, looking at what the infrastructure would need to be in place to support some of those, you know, whether it be electric or liquid hydrogen. Also looking at different types of mobility, you know, everything from scooters and other personal mobility options to like autonomous vehicles. Again, this is a long range look. So any, you know, preliminary findings that might come out of that, we want to incorporate in the 2050 RTP. And we are partnering with NDOT on a couple corridor studies. One is on Mount Rose Highway and the other is going to be looking at the Karen Boulevard loop. Just a quick update on a couple of projects we have underway. We are currently implementing some multimodal improvements on Sun Valley Boulevard. This was a project that's in our current RTP. We're looking at design considerations for the proposed Center Street cycle track, working with reaching out to some of the businesses and seeing how to best incorporate this design. We're also well under the way of design of our Oddie Wells multimodal improvements. So pretty, happy about some of those that are being implemented from our current plan. And this is just a map kind of showing all the projects that were included in 2050, or I'm sorry, our current 2040 RTP. We will be, as I said, some of these are have been completed or underway, but again, we'll be looking at what projects to roll over into the next plan. And again, these are some suggestions that have come both for other studies we've done and also just members of the public. So we're in the South Reno area. And again, from the university area multimodal study, just to put a little context to some of the suggestions that came out of that study. And obviously we're seeing a lot of growth in the North Valleys area. We are working with our partners at the city of Reno and also coordinating with the Reno State Airport. They have some development plans and we're looking at how we could improve connectivity in this area as population and employment does grow. The map shows the purple dash lines are roadway projects that have been suggested either through the development community or residents. And so we're just trying to get all these ideas out there on the table for consideration, and we will start to evaluate those. And as you can see, we've already implemented some improvements. Those are shown in the red, and we have some under design. Those are shown in the yellow. And then the blue lines represent what are in our 2040 plan. Other suggestions we have had, looking at a more regional view, talking about connectivity out to the Tri-Center, working with NDOT and their possible plans for widening I-80. We've had suggestions from residents wanting to see an extension from La Posada out to the Tri-Center. And also the development community on the south end came forward with a proposal for extension of South Meadows. Looking at our transit, we're have a short range transit plan that really kind of focused on how we could improve service within kind of our core service and how we can best serve those high employment and residential dense areas. So we will be updating this plan. I think the idea is we might kick this off in the next fiscal year. As you can see, this current plan covers through 2022. And we've implemented a lot of service changes that have realized some real efficiencies. Obviously, COVID threw us a curveball, so we'll have to reevaluate some of those changes. But one of the things that's worked well, and I'll get into this in a minute, is we've started implementing our FlexRIDE service, which is more of an on-demand type service. This slide shows another project we're pursuing in coordination with the City of Reno and the Reno Housing Authority. We want to upgrade our current transit stop that's across the street from the Peppermill on Virginia there to a full-size rapid station. As you know, our Virginia line, Bus Rapid Transit, serves this area, and there's potential opportunity to even develop some affordable housing in conjunction with this. The Federal Transit Administration has what they call a joint development program that allows for this type of opportunity. And so we are pursuing that. This came out of our recently completed affordable housing study that we did, kind of looking at areas where we have high transit ridership and maybe a lack of housing, and we could kind of marry those two together. So continuing on transit with our Bus Rapid Transit, we have the blue lines show our current Bus Rapid Transit service, but we've had some suggestions for expansion of our Virginia line down to South Reno, as well as extending our current 4th Street Freighter Way, which is also known as the Lincoln Line, further west to maybe facilitate some future development plans in downtown Reno. Getting back to the FlexRIDE service, so we've seen some really good success in our North Sparks area, and we've implemented it in the North Valleys as well. And we'll be starting service up in Spanish Springs and out in Verdi. And so with the success, we are looking for expanding that and seeing how we can maybe support our more fixed route and getting people to those connection points and just improving mobility for kind of those folks, residents out on the what I would call the suburban fringe. And so some of the requests we've had are looking at Red Rock and Cold Springs area, again, South Reno, and this might work in conjunction or tandem with future plans to extend our BRT down there, and also looking at potential service up in Incline Village that might help facilitate service in the greater Lake Tahoe region. We've been talking with our partners up there at TRPA about this potential. We have some significant facility needs as well as our fleet continues to expand into more of an alternative fuel market. Obviously that you need supporting infrastructure for that. And we eventually will be faced with probably having to relocate our Villanova facility under the freeway due to NDOT's plans to improve the freeway. So exploring ideas for where that might best be located. We're looking at expanding our maintenance facility as well on Sutro, and there's some pretty good potential there as well. And lastly, just looking at our Meadowwood Mall transfer station and possibly relocating that within the same vicinity, but somewhere that might function a little better from an operational perspective. And really today, just kind of wanted to give you an update of where we're at in this plan development. Again, if there are projects for consideration, we want to hear about it. And if it's not today, you can certainly contact myself or Leanne or Brian or anyone, and they'll relay that information to the planning department. I see Director of Planning, Amy Cummings, is on the call as well, so she can probably fill in any gaps I might have missed. And with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions.
Hey, Brian, I've got a couple questions.
For Brian or me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, for you, Dan, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
This is just a comment with regards to the Center Street Cycle Track project. Are you guys proposing bicycle signal heads at the signalized intersections?
I believe that's one option we are looking at, and probably that would be better for Brian to address than myself.
Yeah, John, we are looking at that and how to make that a safe corridor with respect to the cycle track being on that one-way facility. And as you know, it's fairly complex, to make sure that we still have the capacity and don't unduly delay folks on there, but also have that safety and the bicycles, opportunity to be able to cross the intersections without interference of the left turns.
Yeah, and I bring that up just because I wanted you to be aware that we got interim approval from FHWA to install the signal heads over there at McCarran and I'm drawing a blank now, Nichols.
Okay, that's awesome. Thanks, John.
And then with regards to the Tri-Center access, Dan, and maybe this is a question more for Bill Thomas. The South Meadows alignment, has anybody gone up and talked to the officials up in Virginia City with regards to this alignment? And the reason why I asked this question is that our city manager has had discussions with those folks, and it appears they're not in support of that alignment. So I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that.
Thank you, John. And I don't believe anyone from planning has. This was initially kind of proposed to us through some of the development community, some landowners in that area, kind of between where, South Meadows ends and into Story County. So, but I haven't heard an update lately, and I don't want to speak for anyone else. So anyone else at RTC, please feel free to jump in.
Hi, this is Amy, also RTC Planning. We do have an inter-county group that's helping us work through the projects in the RTP. So once we have our list of things that are going to be evaluated, we do have members of Story County on that group. So they'll help us evaluate those, and we'll make sure we gather their input.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just wanted to relay what I heard from our city manager.
Thank you.
And then I didn't hear anything, Dan, on the project in Sparks, the multimodal in the industrial. I want to make sure that didn't fall off the radar.
Definitely not. And yeah, we're still kind of gathering. I know we kind of talked recently, and this is a little bit of a dated presentation, just because things are happening so quickly. But that is still on our radar, and we're still evaluating options there.
Great, thank you. And then just lastly, on the FlexRIDE, were you guys anticipating from Incline coming down to Reno, the Reno Sparks area from Incline?
I believe there's a couple thoughts on that. One would just be an actual service within Incline Village. We have talked with TRPA about another, maybe more of a fixed route, kind of regional connection, going from Reno up into Incline and actually down Spooner into Carson City. Obviously, that would be something that we would partner with, with folks at TRPA and Carson City, but looking at potential options for that kind of service as well.
Okay, yeah, you might want to go back when there was the service that went to Sand Harbor. There was an issue with regards to the maintenance of the vehicles when they came down the Mount Rose Highway. They just burned up brakes, and so yeah. just wanted to throw that one out there. That's all I have. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, John.
So Dan, let me just share a little bit on John's question. So John, that's really the concept of that route is not your traditional fixed route. We're looking at a kind of more of an on-demand, and clearly the issue of using RTC assets is in the mix because of what you said. So it's not a traditional fixed route analysis, but more one of a on-demand, see if there's actually a demand from the customers and a market there to do something more than kind of test it. But we got reached out to, or we were contacted by TRPA to see if they would, if we would work with them to see if there's any value to this. So that's what that one's all about.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
John? John, can you hear me?
Yes, Randy.
Just checking. Who, have you heard any issues as to why the South Meadows connection is a concern?
Again, Randy, I just had a very brief conversation, or I was in a brief conversation with Neil, and he just indicated that had anybody talked to the officials up in Story County with regards to the alignment, and he just indicated that they were not in support of it. That's the background I know.
Okay, so you don't know who or?
No, I was not involved with that conversation.
Okay. I'll have to let my folks know.
Any other questions, comments on item 3, the update to the 2050 regional plan?
How long will we be taking suggestions for projects for the 2050 plan?
We would welcome them. Like I said, we're trying to get those down kind of by the end of the month, but I would say, if you need a couple more weeks, 2-3 weeks, we can certainly still accept any suggestions up until that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, there's no action required for this item, so we can move on to item 4, which is the 7th edition of the Regional Road Impact Fee General Administrative Manual Potential Discussion Items. I will take this item on. So basically, we're during the process of updating the 6th edition. As you know, it's quite the process, and we are in front of the commissions, planning commissions, as well as each one of the commissions and boards to get approval of the GAM. So, and update the 6th edition. A lot of questions and concerns were raised during that time. And so Julie Masterpool had summarized those as she went through it and wanted to ensure that we were working on these things should they be something that we want to deal with in the 7th. Dan just gave us a robust update on the 2050 plan. Obviously, the RRIF program is significantly tied to the update of the RTP. And so we will be needing to be working on the 7th edition here as soon as that RTP is updated. And so there's about 9 items here that came up. Some of those we already looked at a little bit and gave sort of our commentary and feedback. I don't know if I need to go through each and every one in detail, but some reference the service area and looking at those districts. So we have some homework to look at that and what might be. But we really wanted to gain some insight from the TAC members on what your feelings are with respect to some of these. And as we move forward into I'll call some scenarios on what these might mean to the program, and then work on it over the next few months into the beginning of next year to discuss items in more detail as we work on the update to the 7th edition. So rather than read it all and do that, I would just open it up. It's in your packets. It was on the meeting agenda to have a discussion and possible ideas and direction of what the TAC would be looking for.
I'll jump in, Brian. I'm not
All right.
afraid. Hey, on the item 1, I think you probably need to get your legal folks to take a look at that because of the way that the NRS is written up. That's going to be very challenging at best to try to make this work because the way that the NRS is written.
Yeah, item 1 is some sort of redefining of the service areas in the benefit district. As most of you know who have worked on the RRIF program for some time, in the 5th edition there was 3 service areas that were dealt with, and then in the 6th edition we were able to combine those into the 2 per NRS. And so, yes, it's a very delicate thing to deal with those refining the service areas in the benefit districts. And so we would walk carefully, but thank you, John, for that suggestion and looking at that.
Yeah, I'll jump in. This is Randy. I really think from a practical standpoint that this is a regional process. That's a regional component and excluding certain areas. So they're not required to pay into the program is not necessarily going to accomplish what they think is going to accomplish. So I don't think that should be a consideration either, but that's just my opinion.
Randy.
Brian, Jim Rundle.
Yeah.
Randy and Craig, you probably remember when we looked at this in the 5th edition, I think that Tischler Bice even carved some areas out, and we ended up identifying and to an extent in a vacuum, regardless of the NRS. But we looked at it, and when you carved areas out, there wasn't enough money created to ever do anything. It would have taken years and years and years, and you would have had money for like one project. So I tend to agree with Randy, and maybe Craig or Randy, you guys remember differently. I don't know.
I agree with all you guys on that. Yeah, we beat this up so much when it was in 3 districts to get it down to 2. And I agree. I don't know whether we want to go down that path again. That took a lot of meetings to get that figured out.
Yeah, we'll dig up the history a little bit on that and ensure that we're going the right direction to make sure we understand that before we would even look into it. But I'll do that, and so I'll understand what we did on the 5th and the challenges that were there.
It's an exercise because you basically capability of doing regional business, you try to do some basis and you're never going to generate and to do anything.
You
I
broke
think
up a
just
little there,
for
so
clarity for everyone, I believe the history of this leads back to when Paul McKenzie was on the RTC board, and the issue of the North Valley's exporting money to Spanish Springs, that was the issue. And that's why I think it was brought up. So I know Claudia's on for City of Reno, but it was kind of more led by the City of Reno, at least the time when this idea was floated. So just to give everybody my recollection of the history of why this is even coming up. So there it is.
thank you, Bill. I believe Blaine did reach out and ask for some feedback also. I think we got some information to work on it, but I would encourage you to look at these over and provide feedback for us based on your recollection of the program, and do we see some sort of areas where we can improve it so that it is a better program for our community. Any other discussions on any of the other items that we have in there, 9 sort of sets of which were brought up?
Yeah, I've got one other one on the TMR PA development model. I think that we had some discussions about the suitability factors and making sure that in the region that we're all using the same suitability factors as Jeremy's running his model. And Jim Rundle might have some additional information on that.
Yeah, I think that's right, John. We were in the last edition on the RRIF, we were talking about ensuring that in the consensus forecast that essentially our TMRPA was utilizing the same method for all the areas of town, as opposed to different methods for different areas, so that it would create or identify what areas which should develop first based on a consistent methodology. And Jeremy Smith was on board with us getting together and trying to come up with those suitability factors. And then essentially it's like an equalizer. You turn up an area for if it's in proximity to a high school, for example. Well, in some areas it's higher than in other areas. So we wanted to identify not just the suitability factors, but what they should be ranked so that they're consistent for the whole Truckee Meadows.
Okay, noted. We will be working with the TRP staff as that consensus forecast comes up and as part of the 2050 RTP update for sure. So.
And this is Leanne. If I recall correctly, I believe we talked about having Jeremy come back at future RRIF meetings to continue this discussion as well.
Okay.
Another comment on this, we've talked about this at some of the prior meetings. The build out scenarios and what factors are used to determine density and intensity of uses in the future that are just planned and not part of the program at this point. I think we need to go back and look at some of that stuff as well. And I agreed to volunteer to help do some of that stuff. So when Jeremy has some time, we can probably get together and see if we can go through that, just to be kind of consistent with what we're doing versus with the plan versus reality in terms of what actually gets developed versus what's proposed and approved.
Hey, Randy, thank you for bringing that up. Now that begs the question of does anybody know where Jeremy is with regards to the build out scenario? I take that as no.
Yeah, John,
John, this is Jen. Hello, John, this is Xuan, and I've been talking with Jeremy, and he's right now working on the RTP TAZ input and also the full build out scenario. So he's still working on that.
Great. Thank you, Swen.
Hey, Brian, I have one to throw just in the mix for consideration if it's not on your list. And that is the drift from what traditionally is the capital improvement projects that drive the RRIF to exactions on projects or developments that may or may not be specifically in there. And I'll give two specific examples. One of them was a traffic signal in Southeast Reno. The other is a potential traffic signal up in the Spanish Springs area, wherein there's a conversation at the regional level about at RTC given credits to impact fees, but they're not project specifically identified. And I do think it's an issue that we need a conversation for clarity on how we do it. Because the idea and concept was the impact fees were designed to remove, in this purest sense, the exactions, but the exactions are the reality of the world sometimes in the political approval process. So it just seems from RTC's standpoint more recently that we're being thrust into putting projects that come out of development into the RTC, at the RTC level into the impact fee program, even though they originally weren't included in it. So just throwing that out there as an issue if it's not on the list, Brian.
Gotta unmute, sorry about that. Yeah, I think that can definitely fall under 5 of the RRIF eligible improvements bill, and I have that noted down on there. All right.
If I could emphasize something on the RRIF eligible improvements, the whole waiver program in terms of what's applicable, what's not applicable, the magic 14,000 ADT that separates everything out probably needs to be looked at in a little more detail. There's too many decisions that end up being made kind of in an arbitrary fashion because there's not enough specifics in terms of how we're making the determinations on what's eligible and what's not. And I think the RRIF TAC needs to spend some time clarifying both timing in terms of when these waivers are available and not available on a project, and what's considered a eligible project.
All right, Randy, thank you for that.
One of the things that I think would be helpful, and it's more because I'm not involved in the individual day-to-day stuff these days, but if we had some idea of what current projects have been approved through the waiver process and what kind of the process has been, what problems you've had with implementing that portion of it would be helpful to us as a group. So we've kind of got an idea what works and what doesn't work on that waiver process versus the credits, because moving from credits to waivers changes the whole scenario significantly.
Hey, Randy, just to add to your point, really there's, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there's only been, 3 or 4 agreements under the waiver program. And one of them was an intersection improvement. The only roadway agreements that I'm aware of are the ones that we did on Wingfield Hills Road. And the one issue, and I shouldn't say it's an issue, but we're working through it with the developers right now, is the credit or the waiver, excuse me, on the right-of-way cost. And so that's just one that we're is a challenge. With regards to the improvements, I think we've kind of got it ironed out, but again, it's just the right-of-way. And when the zoning was established on that parcel and things or within the development, I should say. But that's the most trying item I think that we have today on Wingfield Hills Road.
Yeah, John.
Thanks, John. I think your experience would be helpful for all of us to get a better handle on it. Certainly from a timing perspective, anytime you get into a phase project, the timing of waivers and when they're applied has a pretty significant impact on what you do and when.
Okay, anything else? I mean, some of these were fairly easy that, I mean, we just have to make a decision on. We'll work internally on that. Was, you know, the payment with credit cards. It just really is a yes or no question on what you know we want to do and if we want to change legislation on that. That kind of stuff. But in any case, any other items and Randy, I put your comments with respect to that in that section 9 of there, so we can look at that because I think that's an appropriate spot, which is the RRIF waivers and understanding that eligibility and how that all works and getting information to the TAC members with respect to the agreements that are in place and how they were the challenge points, if any, during those processes. So.
Great.
All right. Any more discussion on this item?
With regards to all these individual items here, Brian, are we going to tackle these one at a time, or we'll just take them on as a topic of the meetings moving forward?
Yeah, great question, John. I think some of these are obviously larger than others, and so I think that we'll be able to handle some of these fairly quickly in a meeting individually, but or maybe in a group. But for a lot of these, I think it's going to take some time to get the information to the TAC and run some scenarios on what does it really mean, you know, to make this change. It's easy to write it down and say this is what needs to happen, but to really analyze it and understand that before we pull the trigger. So I foresee in the next you know, a number of months that we'll put these on the agenda, especially probably the more difficult ones that will need more time first, so that we can start tackling them and make sure we have a good conversation and keep the program as a good benefit for the community.
I would suggest doing it just the opposite, Brian. I would suggest putting the low-hanging fruit first, and then tackling the end, because if we do the tough ones up front, everybody might start to get burned out, and then we lessen the participation.
I concur, John.
Yeah, I agree, John.
I'll also agree with that. It's John from Potic.
Okay.
We've done this too many times.
Yeah.
I'm free for 3 today. I can leave the meeting.
Yep, you're good, John.
I didn't want to burn you out for sure with respect to that. I just didn't want to run out of time, you know, and having things, but it is a big program. And so, yeah, we'll look at the low hanging fruit first and attack that. Any other comments? All right. I think we have an action item on this or possible action. So this would be to acknowledge receipt of these ideas or the potential changes raised during the approval of the 6th edition of the RRIF Capital Improvement General Administrative Manual and provide direction. So do I have a motion to acknowledge receipt?
So moved.
This is Craig Knutson, second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Aye.
Aye.
Sounds like it's a pass. So we'll move on to item 5. And this is a presentation of the impact fee for affordable housing. And I believe Claudia is prepared to discuss this.
I am. Thank you. So we've been working on this for a while over here at the city. And actually, Bill Thomas and I were working on this for the last year or so. So in the 2019 session, the Nevada legislature passed Senate Bill 103, which enables jurisdictions to reduce or subsidize, either in whole or in part, impact fees for projects developing affordable housing for families with an average income of 60%. Your city council adopted an ordinance to establish the required criteria, and staff followed up with the creation of the application and the application process. Every application is required to be reviewed in a public hearing before city council. And at that council meeting, they would review the criteria and the enterprise funds to determine if there are adequate funds to subsidize the project coming forward. The criteria and reductions are listed in my staff report. And I think you all got a copy. I think that was in your packet. The full staff report and ordinance should have been attached to your packet. Essentially the reduction increases with the development of more affordable residential units. And the breakdown is listed in the staff report and the ordinance. The Reno Municipal Code ordinance was written to allow the reduction in any fees associated with an enterprise fund, including RRIF. So the City of Reno ordinance is prepared and ready to go to use this for reduction on the RRIF for the affordable units, with the understanding that additional coordination with RTC would be required, which is why we're here today, which is why I believe Blaine invited me to present. I met with, many months ago when Bill was over at the city, we met with Julie and Amy to discuss this concept. And so we all felt it was appropriate to bring it back here. So the city will be happy to participate in the conversation on how such a process could be constructed or could be structured. And now I would say more than ever, we need to support affordable housing. The city is ready to be a partner in this discussion to help structure moving forward with this concept. You all have my original staff report that went to city council, and I am available for questions or discussion or whatever you would like.
I have a question. Sorry, who was speaking?
John, I just wanted to add something, but you can go to your question.
Oh, no problem. Bill, please.
So I just wanted to piggyback on what Claudia said, and maybe, Craig can jump in on this, but just so everybody understands, as far as a groundswell of affordable units coming on, that 60% AMI as an average is probably going to limit the ability to have very many of these projects. That's a very low threshold. Yep. In my experience. And so I don't know that there's going to be like a run on the bank of a bunch of 60% average units. The other thing is, I think the region has, and Claudia, maybe about $1 million a year to put into projects for affordable housing. And that generally turns out to be maybe one project a year that's funded. So just wanted to get some perspective from my view on whether or not this a change to do some crediting for these types of housing was going to have a run on the bank and deplete a bunch of money. In my personal opinion, I don't think that's the case, but I know, Craig, you live in that world and probably have a better understanding on what it takes to get the 60% AMI as your average rent rate.
Yep. Bill, I'm glad you brought that up. It's looking at the numbers, and I'm also on the home consortium, and Jim's familiar with this too, that it's really going to be something that comes to the home process or lower than that. There's going to be very few projects. The funding available through home is usually in the 1 to 3 million a year. So it's 1 or 2 projects. And in which case, every one of them comes forward to make sure that there are adequate funds available. So at any point, even if the process is established, if it's shown that the funds are not available, it can be denied at that point as well.
Somebody's got to mute, please. There's a screech.
It's me, sorry.
Claudia, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
I'm not on video, so it's hard to, see who's doing what. I mentioned this to you a long time ago, and I think it has to be said. And that is, some of the richest, when I was traveling the country a lot, you meet these affordable housing. I'm talking about in leadership in the Home Builders Association, and these very wealthy, affordable housing developers because you know about the federal incentive, right? Low income housing tax credit, section, what is that? Section 42, I think. And then there's the bond money that comes from the state, which is also a federal allocation. I don't know it well, but I know it enough to talk at this level. And what I just hope the process, Bill said something more reassuring to me, and you did too. And that was, it sounds like it's going to be largely self-regulated. That is, the 60% AMI threshold is a very difficult threshold to meet, and it's maybe 1 or 2 projects a year. But the bottom line concern is this becoming a profit center for affordable housing developers because they got a lot of incentive. And I don't see how you can, with the best of intent, I don't see how you can have any way to regulate that. And by the way, I have some friends in this business locally who I have great respect for, and I know their heart's in the right place. But it's just concerning to me that it turns into a profit center for affordable housing developers. I don't know if you've thought about that, or if you think about any way to have some assurance that it's not leading to that. Thank you.
I really don't think it's going to go that way. We have it set up that the reduction at certain thresholds are only go to the subsidy, only go to those units. So essentially it would be subsidized for, say there's 10 units that are meeting the 60%. It only goes to those. The other ones that are market rates would still have to pay for the hookup fees in sewer. And I think we would structure it the same way. So I think we can look at that balance, but I really don't think that that's going to happen. The only way you would get 100% reduction fee is if you've got 100% of the units at 30% AMI, or let me see, units being affordable for 50%. So if it's 50% AMI, if all the units are 50% AMI, or units not exceeding 30% AMI, is going to be 100% reduction for the associated fee. So it's really limited on where this is going to apply.
Yeah, that sounds like it's tough to get there, right? I mean, really tough. The economics of that are I mean, that's hard to comprehend when you get down to 30%. And you probably have something, in trip rate where it's lower because it's a smaller household, smaller unit, less income, and maybe less resources to even have a car, right? So it also takes care of itself that way. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. The only one we've seen come forward, and I don't even think that's come in for permit yet, is Monica Dupuis project over on West 4th by Keystone. I think that was the only one that was going to trigger that. And I think it's like 6 units or something like that. It's not very large. And then everything else is really, Jim, you might remember, I don't think we see more than 10 units meeting this threshold on the larger projects. There's really not that many.
Yeah, it goes down every year as the cost of housing goes up and the CDBG dollars stay the same. I think it's like 8.
Yeah, I think it's getting down to that point.
Hey, Claudia, this is John Erickson. I was just curious to know, in your analysis, did you guys take a look at how it affects the overall benefit district? Because it's just not the city of Reno in a benefit district. You also have Washoe County and City of Sparks. Did you take a look at the benefit district as a whole as far as the fees? Because obviously you're going to be collecting less, and then how does that affect, like I said, but the benefit district?
No, we haven't yet. We're just starting that process on it. So talking with Amy and Julie, we thought we would bring it here to get some questions and guidance from this group. And then if you so choose, then we would continue the conversation among staff and do further analysis.
My suggestion off the cuff, I think, Claudia, would be City of Reno potentially would do, as you're outlining, take it to your council for a sponsorship or direction to the RRIF TAC, and that probably that would come ultimately from the RRIF to the RTC board, and then the RTC board in the, what are we in the 8th edition now, would ultimately if that's something we want to tackle, would send that out to the 3 jurisdictions, because I think all 3 jurisdictions have to approve the same ordinance in the RIF. So if we have Reno approving its individual ordinance, it's no longer in compliance with the original direction from the RIF and the RTC board.
And Jim, I think to follow up on what you're saying is it would be good to have clarity if it's going to be regional on how it's handled. For example, right now with the housing consortium, it's kind of jurisdiction neutral in that the 3 entities get together and allocate the federal money to do the projects, not predetermining where they are. They kind of land wherever they are. Generally speaking, they're in Sparks or Reno, but maybe that's the way to do this, is append it to that process. So you assure that it is, affordable housing for the region and in a process that's more regional rather than local. Just a thought.
Claudia, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
We're looking at impact fees. Has anybody looked at the real generator of fees, which is TUMWA fees? Because the impact on new housing from TUMWA is pretty significant in comparison to RTC and sewer and et cetera.
I don't believe they qualify because I don't think it's set up as an enterprise fund. Correct me if I'm wrong. The way the state law is written is it's only for, get the wording, for fees associated with an enterprise fund. I don't believe that's set up in the same way. So our ordinance is pretty much word for word from state law.
Because in reality, the big fee generator to new housing's TUMWA.
Yeah, and that's something they can look at in another session, but this session, all it focused on was enterprise.
So what does that include besides RTC and sewer?
Sewer, building permits, and RTC.
I have a question. This is Stephanie Haddock. I'm finance director for RTC. Just so you're aware, it's not an enterprise fund at the RTC, it's special revenue.
That's correct.
Impact fees are restricted, so it's set up as a special revenue fund, not an enterprise fund.
Okay, let me get into.
I think while you're looking that up, Claudia, I think the thing that's unique about this is each of the individual jurisdictions has the ordinance that actually creates the fee, and then the money is basically administered by RTC. So when the conversation is about an RTC fee, it's really the jurisdictions. Getting back to Jim's point about theoretically you could have differential ordinances that have different rates on affordable housing, and then RTC would be in the middle trying to make sense of it.
I'm trying to pull up the state law here. I know it came from our attorney's office that the RRIF fee was could be subject to it. We'll look into that. I don't want to go through the state law right now, but I will look into that more and I'll get back with my attorneys and get back to you. But it was my understanding from our attorney's office that it would apply to this.
Any more questions for Claudia with respect to affordable housing ordinance?
Claudia, just kind of expand on what John was talking about. It might be beneficial to RRIF TAC and others, and particularly other jurisdictions, what the impact to the program would be with the reduction in fees being generated from the affordable housing side, just so everybody has a concept of the magnitude of what we're talking about. You know, we're talking about a small number of units. It might be more beneficial to try to explain that in dollars so people have a better understanding of what the actual impact is. Just a suggestion from your standpoint.
So just like a hypothetical, if it was.
Sure, yeah, exactly. Just
okay.
Given what's currently going on, given current projects, this is kind of what the impact would be to building, sewer, RRIF TAC. I think it'd be helpful.
Okay, well,
Claudia.
City of Reno's already adopted the ordinance, so building and sewer are already in place. So and the city's done what we need to on our part for this, for RIF. But I will work with RTC to get the numbers on a per unit basis.
Claudia, do you have a number in mind? I mean, we know we're not talking thousands and we're not talking 10. Is it 100? Is it a couple hundred a year? You have a sense of that will be candidate for this?
I don't know. Mike Michelle is on this call. I don't know if he's still on here or not. I don't know what it is per unit, or if anybody has that concept. Amy, I don't know if you know the numbers.
I don't have that available right now.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get order of magnitude. That's all. Just some perspective on, right?
Sure, we can get that. We can figure it out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that helped me kind of wrap my head around this as well, just to kind of see the number and the magnitude of this.
So I assume that would be a multifamily sort of, I mean, just as a rough idea, I think we're looking at what, just a little bit over $3,000 per, divided by the BMT. So, sort of gives you an idea with respect to that. So the north is at 3,280 and the south is at 3,000 and some change.
So if there's 8 units, I guess would be your example there on a typical project that we're seeing these days.
I think it'd be helpful to have an idea what like a yearly component of units would entail without being able to figure that out ahead of time. Just a hypothetical would be helpful.
Sure.
Maybe I'm not clear on what I was asking. If we know that there's, Claudia, do you know how many units we deliver to the region, multifamily, on a good year? Forget the recession. I don't know.
On a good year, I would say 8 to 12 units.
8 to 12 units?
Yeah, that would qualify.
You're talking about projects or units?
Units.
Wow. Oh, okay. Well, this is, I mean,
We're not talking much.
Okay, then see, that's the incentive that we're talking about that makes perfect sense. I was thinking hundreds in the context of thousands, and
No,
it still sounds reasonable. But,
right,
but
so
you know what I mean? I didn't realize that we're talking about tens of units. Not,
yeah, right.
Okay.
So the overall project will come in with 200 units maybe, and maybe 8 to 10 of those are going to be qualifying units.
Thank you. That helps a ton.
Projects, that's going to be 16 to 20 units. It's not a lot of units, which is what went into place.
Yes,
Thanks.
that helps.
I got a quick question, and I'm probably getting into the weeds a little bit, but I kind of remember when we were discussing this, Ted Erkin brought up the point that the affordable housing component only lasts, it sunsets in like 10 years, and then those units can go to whatever rent the remaining units go to. Is there a sunset on the affordable housing component?
The city ordinance has set at 20 years.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Not specified in state law.
So many more questions for Claudia on this. Okay, we'll have some more discussion later on. This item is to receive a presentation by the City of Reno staff regarding potential reduction of fees for affordable housing. It is just the receive, so a motion for receive a report.
So moved.
Second, David Blake.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Item
All right.
6.
Thanks, everyone.
Comment. Any more public comment come in?
No.
Or any? Thank you. All right, item 7 is member items. We can go around the table. I guess to be in an organized fashion. Was Mike or Kurt on the call? No?
I think Mike might be now.
Mike, Michelle, do you have any member items? Hearing none. Amy, do you have any, Amy Cummings, any items?
I do not. Thank you.
David Blacko, do you have any?
I do not. It's actually pronounced Blako as well.
Blacko, sorry.
No worries. Thank you.
Mitch Fink, do you have any member items?
Nothing at this time, thanks.
Jim Rundell, do you have any?
I don't have anything else.
Okay, thank you. John Erickson?
No, I don't. Thanks, Brian.
John Kromprodik?
I do not have anything, and I'm impressed that you pronounced my name correctly.
I've been practicing. Craig, any comments?
I have no items, but I do want to thank RTC for changing the speed limit on Veterans Parkway finally.
That was the City of Reno. City of Reno.
City of Reno. Thanks, City of Reno.
Craig,
So
thanks
is
for
your
bringing that up. If you remember, we had a very intense discussion about this when we met live about 6 or 8 months ago. And we were talking about how it felt like a freeway and you're bogged down to 45. And anyway, so maybe we carried a tiny bit of weight on that one.
I feel so, we feel so omnipotent.
I'd like to see them raise it to 65 now.
Well, the discussion we had was 55 and they went up to 50. So
yeah.
All right. Randy, Walter, do you got any items?
Nothing other than to thank the City of Reno for increasing that speed limit. I'm sure it was a reduction in your revenue from speeding tickets because I noticed the number of citations being issued is significantly less than it was.
Okay, did I miss anybody? I apologize on my list here. If I missed anybody. Leanne, is there anybody I missed?
No, you're good.
Okay. Sounds good. So the next RRIF TAC meeting, we need, if this time works great, which everybody's, eager at 8:30 to start a RRIF TAC meeting, we would like to set it at the 8:30 time frame. So it'd be, would that be, Leanne, the August 21st?
Fourth Thursday of the month, and hold on, I can tell you the real quick.
So August 27th then.
Yes.
So I apologize, August 27th to be 8:30 for the next RRIF TAC meeting.
are we ever going to meet in person?
I don't foresee that happening for the short term.
I've got my mask.
What does, seriously, Brian, what is, we're all getting, exhausted from Zoom meetings, although I admit they're incredibly inconvenient, but I'd much rather meet in person. Do you have any, Bill Thomas is on, I'll bet he would know better than anybody as the leader of the group, if there's any perspective on when it's coming back live.
Bill, are you still on? I think Bill went off.
Maybe Brian. Yeah.
Yeah, we're really watching the state and what comes out from the governor with respect to that and the safety and abundance of caution. We're staying on electronic Zoom meetings and just trying to keep people safe, not only the staff, but the public. And so I don't have a deadline. Again, we're watching the governor and his guidance that's out with respect to that. So I anticipate at least August, we will have a Zoom meeting when then we'll have to reevaluate, come September and October as we get into fall. Obviously, it starts a whole nother season of flu season. So I don't have the answers for you on that.
It's all good. I get it. Thank you.
All right. Item 8, which is adjournment, possible action.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
Aye.
That concludes.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
See you all.
Thank you.